So, not gonna say much, but thanks for clicking on this video, and this is the second part of What If Deku Had Returned by Death. And I am not the creator of this fanfiction. Please support him, and the original link will be in the description. So let's begin. 455 Chapter 11, Lies, Dreams, and Hard Truths. The first time, he was too slow. When he finally found Iida in that dark and miserable alleyway, it was to the sight of his body lying prone in a puddle of cooling blood. There was someone else there too, just as still and lifeless as his friend, but Izuku didn't stay long enough to identify them before he reset. Dying was becoming easier, and Izuku was not sure if that thought comforted him or not. In the end, it did not matter what he thought of it, he would end up restarting either way. So, he chose to ignore it instead. He just did what needed to be done. He was quite proud of his second entrance. It had been a blaze of speed and strength, with his fist landing square into Iida's would-be killer's face faster than anyone could shout, "Deku!" As his knuckles made contact, there was an audible crunch that Izuku found much more satisfying than any proper hero should. He chose to ignore that too. Iida stared at him, shocked, and with something that might be despair written across his face, while his body lay paralyzed and frustratingly vulnerable on the crimson-splattered ground. But when he shouted, "This had nothing to do with you. Don't get involved," the only thing Izuku felt was anger, burning deep, like acid in his gut. Was Iida really telling him to run? Did he have any clue as to what would happen if Izuku did? "Do you really want to die that badly?" His words were harsh, he knew. Of course Iida didn't know. Couldn't know. It must be easy for him to imagine that justice, which is no doubt what his friend keeps telling himself is the true reason he found himself in this alley, chasing after the man who mutilated his brother, would always prevail. But Izuku knew better. Izuku knew that sometimes, evil did win. But people would continue to convince themselves otherwise, so that they could fall asleep at night, knowing that nothing could, would, or ever will harm them of the people they cared about. Everything would be fine. Things always worked themselves out in the end. What a joke. But Iida didn't have to know just what a big lie it all was. He already got a taste of it when his older brother was rushed to the hospital, and it was announced that he may never walk again. No, people needed to believe that everything would be fine. They needed to believe that a hero always show up to save the day. It's the dream All Might fights to protect every day, what Izuku fights to protect, what all heroes should fight to protect. Because the truth was enough to drive you insane. If you want me to leave that badly, then make me. Iida didn't make a move, and Izuku couldn't care less whether that was because of Stain's quirk or not. 455 Chapter 12, Punchline. It was naive of him to think he could take on the hero killer by himself, but he had been unwilling to put anyone else in harm's way. He figured it would be fine. If he lost, Stain would just kill him and he was free to try again. But he didn't. Instead, as Izuku cried for his muscles to move, the villain moved right past him, as if he hadn't even realized Izuku was there in the first place. His feet slowed and finally stopped as they found themselves in front of Iida, still on the ground. Izuku could only scream as he watched that blade plunge into his friend's neck. The other hero with them, Native, followed shortly after. Unable to move, watching Iida's face growing ever paler as blood spurted out of his gaping mouth and open wound, was by far the worst thing Izuku had experienced during the loops. The USJ couldn't compare, because at least then he had always been able to do something, even as he tried to look away just an inch. "That's all I'm begging for. Just move an inch." He couldn't shut his ears to the wet gurgling of Iida struggling for his one last breath. Stain left, not even deigning his victims with a glance as he stalked off. "You're weak, but your hero's spirit is strong. Let this experience serve as a lesson. Remember it, and use it to grow strong, so that next time you may save a life." He wasn't sure what was so amusing, but a shrill laugh suddenly burst through his lips. It echoed and bounced across graffitied walls and halted the killer in his track. "A lesson? You killed my friend for a lesson?" Tears streamed down his face. "You tell me to save lives, but what about you?" His fingers twitched. "I don't want to hear that from a murderer." If hero killer Stain had any retort to that, Izuku didn't wait to listen. His neck cracked and windpipes crushed against impossibly strong fingers. The laughter stopped, and the alleyway fell silent. 455 Chapter 13, Heat. As much as he detested the idea of putting anyone else but himself in danger, he didn't have much choice. Someone was going to get hurt no matter what he did, but he could at least increase his chances of everyone getting out of this alive. His fingers swiped over the screen of his phone, known to him as well as the back of his own hand. It came from days since past, when every free period at school would be spent browsing the latest hero news and forums while he waited for the day to be over. The message was simple, only containing his location, along with his hope. He didn't have any time to elaborate, and all he could do was to keep faith as it was delivered to every last number saved in his contacts. And when orange flames lit up the alleyway, crashing through it like a furious wave and licking the edges of his vision as it warmed his too clammy, too cold body, he could feel his hope burn with it. Only one person had answered his plea for help, but Izuku could not have asked for anyone better. Todoroki-kun. 455 Chapter 14, Cold. Deku should have expected it. He should have, but he hadn't wanted to. He hadn't. I never wanted any of this. Wanted to. The pride he felt as he watched Todoroki use his left side, wielding the flames like they belonged to him, because they did, it's your power, was overshadowed by pain when he watched them flicker out and die. The scarred face of the boy looked colder than ever, and Izuku hated how he could hear every sickening drop, rip and slice in the silence left after the roaring fire's wake. Of course he would get Todoroki killed. Again, it's not any better than the first. And Iida, and Native, you're weak, but your hero's spirit is strong. Let this experience serve as a lesson, remember it, and use it to grow strong, so that next time you may save a life. Ha, ha, ha. Now that's funny. 455 Chapter 15, Stain. You're weak, but your hero's spirit is strong. Let this experience serve as a lesson, remember it, and use it to grow strong, so that next time you may save a life. You're weak, but your hero's spirit is strong. Let this experience serve as a lesson, remember it, and use it to grow strong, so that next time you may save a life. You're weak. You. Save a life. Shut up. Izuku couldn't listen to this again, he couldn't. Again and again and again. I just want you gone already, gone. Restart. Reset. I wish you were dead. This was not supposed to happen. This isn't what heroes did. Right, that man was going to kill them. Iida, Native, Todoroki. He deserved it, but Izuku wasn't happy, nor sad, or guilty. Not even angry. He just felt nothing at all. Blood stained his pristine white gloves red, and he felt nothing. It had been so easy, it was almost funny. Here, he had fought so hard, retried so many times, but all it had taken was one punch. His arm hung limply, a rainbow of blues, reds and purples. If he could have felt it, he bet the pain would be excruciating. But all he felt was the dead weight of an unresponding limb by his side, numb, like the rest of him. Jade eyes stared darkly at Stain, propped up against a wall and slumped over bonelessly. Red liquid seeped into the fabric of his clothes, almost invisible against the red and blacks, which Izuku supposed was the point. The head had been reduced into a red and pink stain on the wall, with chunks of skin, hair and splinters of bone clinging to every nearby surface, glued on with drying blood. It was sick, but the thought was nothing more than a courtesy. Locked behind a glass wall, it pounded and shouted for him to listen. But the boy couldn't even deign himself to so much as glance in its direction, preferring to feign deafness in place of this screaming voice that spoke all too much. Midoriya-kun. He jolted into awareness when he felt a hand slam down onto his shoulder. Iida was staring at him, eyes wide, looking as if he didn't even recognize the person before him. You, the broad-shouldered teen swallowed heavily, looking unsure. As if he didn't know whether to pull Izuku toward him or push away. His lips opened and closed over and over again, but no words ever left. Then, in a move that must have surprised them both, the Emerald Boy was pulled into a tight hug. Izuku's shoulder was growing wet as Iida found his head buried into the crook of his neck. I'm sorry. Izuku heard Iida mumble the words over and over, as he rocked both their bodies slowly back and forth. And, just like that, the walls broke and crumbled into dust as Izuku's body shook violently as sob after sob ripped through his throat painfully. It hurt, so much, but Iida refused to let go, only clinging onto him harder. He knew what had to be done. But, for just a moment, Izuku let himself stay like that, as each boy cried their pains out. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. 455 Chapter 16, Burning. And, sorry for the delay. I had some trouble writing this chapter. Skeptical smiley face, but hey. At least it's my longest one yet. You've improved a lot since we last fought each other, Todoroki commented, staring at him with a blank expression that Izuku sincerely wished he could read. I have to admit, I feel a bit intimidated. Izuku laughed nervously, his fingers curling into his hair and tugging at the strands until he felt his skin prickle in pain. Oh, that was just the adrenaline. Todoroki blinked at him slowly, looking skeptical. But then, he shrugged, before training icy eyes upon the unmoving form below them. He ran his fingers over the bleeding cut on his cheek and his face scrunched up into a grimace. His offended expression forced one side of Izuku's lips to curl up in response, and he lowered his head in a poor attempt to conceal it, not looking to provoke his classmate any further. Could have been worse, the curly-haired boy commented dryly, glancing over Todoroki's unmarked arms. The stoic teen quirked an eyebrow in response, but when no further explanation was given, returned back to the topic at hand. At any rate, we should find a hero, before this villain regain consciousness. Izuku agreed with a silent nod, and Todoroki bent over to pick up one end of the rope meticulously bound around the red and black form of hero killer Stain, while Iida stood by the sidelines, uncharacteristically silent. Native wasn't far off, but the pro looked like he didn't quite know what to do with himself. It must be embarrassing for him, to be rescued from the clutches of a notorious serial killer by 3 school kids. Though the relief of still being alive probably took away most of the sting. Gran Torino gave them an earful when he found them, as did the other pro heroes that arrived on scene. Still, there was a hint of awe there too, barely disguised between lectures about responsibility and harsh words telling them how lucky they had been. It's a miracle none of you sustained any serious injuries. You kids could have died, fighting a villain like this. Izuku's lips pressed into a thin line. He felt something burning beneath his skin, making him itch with the desire to rake his nails all over it, scratching and scratching until it went away. Instead, he spoke without meaning to, and regretted it as soon as the words left his stiff lips. Iida and Native would be dead if it weren't for me. He wasn't sure what the look the heroes gave him meant. Gran Torino frowned at him in clear disapproval, and Izuku bit the inside of his cheek hard until he tasted blood. He let out a trembling sigh and let his green eyes fall to the ground, inspecting every crack and crevice in the asphalt like it was his favorite novel. Someone called an ambulance while another contacted the police, and Iida approached his classmates silently. Then, he bowed deeply in typical Iida fashion, before rambling out some apology that Izuku barely had the energy to listen to. You were both put in terrible danger because of me, I am truly sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Izuku let out a loud gasp, curling in on himself as he felt a throbbing pain in his chest and a feeling of drowning so great he didn't even notice the fingers scratching at his throat in frantic and desperate gestures. And even though he continuously gulped down air like one would water, it was like vacuum in his lungs and he couldn't breathe. He felt like he was dying. Midoriya. There was a second of confusion, where all he could hear were screams and shouts, along with a feeling of weightlessness. Another second and he realized that, no, someone was carrying him, their sharp claws digging painfully into his back as they took off with him into the sky, wings flapping loudly as they carried him off to God knows where. Izuku didn't know who, or what, had taken him, but one look at the faces staring back up at him from the ground, twisted up in surprise, shock and horror, told him enough. No, he thought, Stain had finally been defeated, after so many tries, after so many deaths. Izuku couldn't, he wouldn't. I refuse to go through that again. Anger bubbled up inside of him once more, so hot that he feared it might boil him alive if he let it continue. He screamed so loud he thought he could taste copper in his mouth, loud enough to shatter his eardrums. It wasn't a scream out of terror or fear, but one of frustration, anger, rage. He'd never felt a feeling so intense, it was almost frightening. He screamed, and he wasn't sure when it happened, but he could feel the power of One for All coursing through his veins, mixing with the fury and hate that was devouring his insides like a black hole. He twisted in his grip, and he felt talons dig deep red lines into his back, but he couldn't care less. He lifted his arms over his head, and his fingers curled around the base of the monster's bird-like feet. With practiced motions, he twisted, digging fingers deep and deeper, refusing to be the first to let go. The thing screeched ungodly as it was forced to relinquish its grip on its victim, but Izuku held on. He continued to scream as he climbed up its body, placing himself on its back as he began to twist one of its wings, shouting words of command. "Let me go, let me down, before I tear both your wings off." He wrenched his curled fist for emphasis, and whether the thing actually understood him or not, it began to lower itself ungracefully to the ground as it continued to shriek and writhe, struggling uselessly to throw Izuku off of its back. It wasn't until it crashed stomach first into the asphalt that he deigned to relinquish his grip on the creature. He took a few tentative steps back as he fought against the anger still raging hot inside of him, breathing hard as he tried to calm down. One for All still surged through his limbs, with want, but Izuku knew he couldn't. "Don't do it, you know you can't." He closed his eyes for just a moment, and when he opened them again, red and black flashed across his eyes. A familiar vision of chipped metal made him jump back, but Stain made no move for him. The sight of the lifeless Numu distressed him, for he wasn't sure if he felt relieved or not. But intact with the bloodied sword that slid out of the monster's skull, was the pressure lifting off his mind, and he felt. Stain was breathing just as heavily as Izuku himself, awash with anger and frustration, too immense to stay trapped within their flesh as it clawed itself screaming through their throats. The boy bit his tongue as his mouth clamped shut, making a vain attempt to beat his emotions into submission, and it took him a few seconds to realize that the villain was speaking. "All of this is for the sake of a just world. I will continue to purge this world of these fraudulent heroes until they finally realize the true meaning of the word, and if they don't, this sham of a hero industry shall die with them." "What the hell are you even talking about?" Izuku thought, bitterly. "In what world is murdering my friends justice?" Stain shifted by his side, neck snapping backwards and eyes glowing red with righteous fury, and wasn't that just the most pathetic thing Izuku had ever seen? He spoke. "Endeavor. The fakest of the fakes. Well, even a broken clock is right twice a day." Izuku turned around, taking in the newly arrived hero. As much as he disliked the man, he was more than happy to see him, knowing that this nightmare would finally be over. Izuku didn't know how Stain had managed to break free of his bonds in the first place, which he insisted on tying himself, checking every knot twice before he was satisfied, but the number 2 hero should be more than enough to keep the villain detained until the police arrived to arrest him. And then he can rot in prison for the rest of his life. With any luck, he'll realize what a horrible person he is and use his scarf as a noose to spare the world of his existence. Izuku's eyes widened just as the thought passed. What the hell did I just? He shook his head, shuddered, and filed that reaction away to be analyzed at a later date. Right now, his gaze landed on Stain. He was still standing in the same spot as before, the only difference being that his bandana had fallen off at some point, revealing a hollow space in his face where a nose should be. Why is he still standing here? Is he still speaking? Then, he looked to the heroes. They all shared the same expression of unimaginable terror, including the number 2 hero Endeavor himself. What the hell are they doing? There is a villain right in front of you. How about you do your job and apprehend him already? His brows furrowed in confused frustration, cutting the villain off before more bullshit could spill out of his mouth. Hey. As the one-word syllable left his mouth, it was as if some spell had been broken, but Izuku wasn't sure what it was. All he felt was the shift in atmosphere as Stain's tirade trailed off into nothingness, and the seemingly frozen heroes thawed and left whatever trance they had been put in. They all blinked in unison rather comically, looking all so very confused that it was hard not to giggle at the absurdness of it. Shouldn't you arrest this guy or something? I mean, it is kinda your job. So maybe stop standing around there being completely useless and do something. And with that, whatever remnants of magic stain held over the crowd of heroes dissolved like smoke and carried off into the wind to places unknown. Faces of terror morphed into shame and embarrassment. Maybe Izuku should feel guilty for speaking so out of turn, but honestly, right now, he couldn't give less of a shit, even if he tried. He just wanted to go home already. Go home, so that he can scream until he can't anymore. And when his throat seizes up and his vocal cords are torn to bloody shreds, the only sound that will echo in his ears is his own shrill voice, like a fire alarm installed right behind his eardrums, ringing and ringing until it eventually falls silent, drowned and muffled by the blood filling his ear canals, his nose being assaulted by the smell of iron as it runs down his jaw, rivulets of red warming his face and dripping off of his chin like a broken tap. And then, he can't hear anything. There will be no sound, and no feeling. There will be nothing. Just silence. 455 Chapter 17, What is a Hero? And, oh shit, look who's back. Izuku didn't think this hospital visit was necessary, but he supposed it was only standard protocol. As expected, neither Todoroki nor Iida had received any serious injuries. Izuku made sure of it. The one to receive the worst of it was himself, but the red gashes on his back looked worse than they really were. Hopefully, they could leave soon. He just wanted to go home already. I wonder if Mom heard about what happened yet. His mouth twisted into a grimace. It would be nice to have an invisibility quirk like Hagakure. If he did, he'd be able to disappear at a moment's notice. And by the time someone finally realizes, he'd already be far, far gone. He could feel eyes on him. Had been, for a while. It made his skin crawl, because he knew what kind of eyes those were. Curious eyes. Questioning eyes. Concerned eyes. He wanted to puke. Stop it. Stop looking at me. Stop caring. Why can't you just forget about me? He knows it should make him happy. His friends worried about him, because he was important to them. But it didn't make him happy at all, and that just made Izuku hate himself even more, because it was so selfish of him. Wallowing in his own little pity party of despair when he should be happy, because he's gotten everything he wanted. The least he could do is show some fucking appreciation. Look at you. You're a hero now. Great. Fucking hero. You should give yourself a gold star, or something. He let out a bitter laugh that caught in his throat, threatening to morph into a sob, because Izuku just couldn't keep his emotions in check it seemed. He didn't know what was so funny, but it felt like the only appropriate response to the situation. That's right, just laugh it up. I'm sure you'll stop hating yourself then. When the door to hospital room holding Izuku and his two classmates clicked open, he turned his head in its direction. There stood Gran Torino, along with the hero Manuel and a man that Izuku didn't recognize. The stranger woofed in greeting, and Izuku really should have expected that, considering the person was sporting the head of a literal dog. Nonetheless, it still managed to catch him off guard. He looked to Gran Torino, but the retired hero only shook his head at his inquisitive stare. The dog man's name was Saragame Kenji, chief of police. From the sounds of it, he was here to scold them for their unlawful quirk usage. Which no, he's totally right. They should have just let Stain kill them without even attempting to fight back. Which, sure, Izuku would have called it self-defense, but no, we must think of the poor serial killer. He might have gotten seriously hurt. Izuku immediately cast a paranoid glance around the room, making sure that he didn't say any of that out loud. But when all the attention still seemed to be focused on Saragame, he let out a sigh of relief. As much as he wanted to speak up, this wasn't the time to pick a fight with the police. Hold on, Todoroki interrupted the lecture, furrowing his brows. If we hadn't done anything, Iida and Native would be dead right now. Are you saying we should be punished for that? Izuku suddenly felt much lighter, glad he wasn't alone in his opinion. He's been filled with so many unwanted and intrusive thoughts lately, he was beginning to forget what was and wasn't appropriate. Encouraged by the elemental user, He straightened his back and added to Todoroki's words. Heroes are supposed to save people, he said, accusatory eyes locking onto the police chief. His insides fluttered uncomfortably, but he continued anyways. Actually, scratch that, we should all strive to help each other, not just heroes. I don't see much difference between using a quirk to defend myself, compared to martial arts or a knife. Would you arrest me for punching a robber in the face? It wasn't like he didn't understand the need for quirk regulations, but if the threat of being taken into police custody was the reward for fighting tooth and nail for your own survival, there needed to be changes. Iida jumped up from the spot on his bed to swipe his arms in Izuku's and Todoroki's direction. Stop it, both of you. He's got a point, and your reaction is just going to make it worse for us. Good grief, Saragame sighed. You're really not making this easy for me. Izuku thinks that last part was directed at him, because the police chief shot him a somewhat disappointed look. Quirks can be much harder to control, and cause a lot more damage, than your fists. I'd expect you to understand that better than most. Besides, I think you're both misunderstanding something here. Todoroki looked suspicious, and Izuku shared his sentiment. He'd had enough shit thrown his way that any form of respite was immediately suspect. Still, the pair waited silently for the chief to continue before they caused any more of a commotion. The dog man sighed one more time, before he explained. That was just my opinion as the police. But punishing you would only be necessary if your involvement in defeating the hero killer was made public knowledge. His expression turned serious as he regarded the three students, or as serious as a dog's face could look. It's ultimately your decision. What is more important to you? The admiration of the public? Or would you rather continue to live your lives normally, with the knowledge that your role in taking down hero killer Stain must remain a secret? The chief crossed his hands behind his back and straightened his posture. I know what I would choose. And despite what you may believe, I would rather not penalize you for taking down one of Japan's most notorious serial killers. Now, that surprised him. The knots in his stomach loosened slightly, and Izuku peered over at Todoroki and Iida. Personally, he could care less about public opinion. I didn't save my friend so strangers can fawn over me. His classmates seemed to agree, because now they were bowing their heads and voicing their gratitude. Izuku let his own head drop with them because, yes, despite his earlier outbursts, he was appreciative of what Saragame was doing for them. He wasn't going to take out his bitterness on him by showing bad manners. Well, he'd try not to, at least. I might have to apologize to some people later, once I'm in a better mood. I've said a lot of things that I really shouldn't have. Even if he meant every word of it. It didn't take long before they were allowed to leave the hospital. But before they were discharged, Izuku's mother dropped by for a visit, to no surprise. What was also unsurprising was when Izuku had to reassure her at least 10 times that he was fine, before she would finally stop crying. And once visiting hours were up, she ignored the nurses telling her the patients needed their rest, refusing to budge until the green-haired boy had to make a promise that he would call as soon as he could leave, and head straight home afterwards. Uraraka didn't visit personally, too busy with her internship, but she did give him a call to make sure they were all right. Izuku had stared at the name displayed across his phone screen for several seconds, before finally picking up. Uraraka bombarded him with questions, mostly about their condition and the severity of their injuries. Izuku answered to the best of his ability, silently wishing for this conversation to end already. You sound tired, Uraraka commented suddenly, worry evident in the tone of her voice. A lot happened, Izuku answered simply, shrugging of her concerns. But it's all fine now. I'll just get some good sleep when I get home. He refrained from telling her that there was a greater chance of him winning the lottery, than the possibility of him getting a decent night's sleep. Iida had been unusually quiet for most of their stay. Each time Izuku peered in his direction, he seemed to be deep in thought. Izuku thought that maybe he was supposed to wait for his friend to share his feelings at his own pace, but eventually he grew tired of just staring. He stood up, made himself comfortable next to Iida on the hospital bed, and spoke. What are you thinking about? Iida blinked, caught off guard by the sudden query. You've been staring at the floor like it holds the answer to all of life's mysteries, Izuku commented, nodding toward the white linoleum. What's on your mind? Iida gazed at him with a contemplative expression. There was an awkward silence, and by the time Izuku accepted that he wasn't going to receive an answer, the familiar deep timbre of his friend's voice entered his ears. Do you think I'd make a good hero? Izuku had to make a double take at that. A hollow feeling settled in his chest and he wondered, where is this coming from all of a sudden? Of course, he answered, frowning. Why do you ask? Iida sighed, his eyes returning to their staring contest with the floor. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead right now. When I saw the hero killer, I wasn't thinking rationally. I just wanted him to be punished for what he did. I didn't care how, I just know. The boy cringed, before speaking in a low tone, almost a whisper. I know I wanted him to hurt. Iida carefully met his eyes, but his head remained angled downwards, almost as if he was afraid of facing his classmate fully. He looked so defeated, and Izuku felt his heart twinge in pain. Then, he asked, does that make me a bad person? Izuku grabbed his friend's hands, his scarred fingers wrapping around them in a too tight grip, like he was afraid of what would happen if he let go. His stomach felt sick. He wouldn't allow his Iida to hurt like this. He wouldn't. You're not a bad person, Iida-kun, he told him, his voice containing as much strength and conviction as he could muster. He needed Iida to know. He needed him to know that, no, you're not a bad person. Stain hurt someone you loved. Of course you wanted him to hurt too, don't feel bad for being human. All right, but, Iida tugged his hands free, his gaze falling into his lap. His head dropped even lower than before as he hunched over himself, arms shaking. That still doesn't excuse what I did. I shouldn't have confronted him alone like that. I should have just contacted Manuel right away. Native and I could have died because of my selfishness. Iida. The dark-haired boy turned to look at him. His expression was grim, overflowing with deep-seated regret and burning shame. This isn't right. Like I said, you're not a bad person. Yes, you made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. You, me, even All Might can't be right all the time. Your brother was put in the hospital, and the first thought when you saw the man responsible was to hurt him. And that's normal, okay. Iida nodded, but he still looked unconvinced. Izuku continued, like you said, you weren't thinking rationally. But that doesn't make you a bad person. Anyone would have felt the same in your situation. And if they tell you they wouldn't, they're either a liar or a psychopath. Izuku took a deep breath, gathering his words, before finishing. All you can do now is to learn from it. It's pointless trying to think of what you should, or could have done. It won't change anything, and it definitely won't make you feel better. You just need to make sure you don't make the same mistake twice. Izuku locked eyes with his friend, emerald green meeting a royal blue. All right, it took a few moments, but eventually, Iida nodded. It was slow, unsure, but he didn't look like he was dismissing the words completely. Instead, he looked considering. That's good. It would still need time to stew, but Izuku hoped his words would make the impact he was hoping for. He's not used to comforting people, aside from his mother. But for his friends, he would try. It's what a hero would do. What any decent human being would do. Besides, Izuku added, after a thoughtful silence. If you're a bad person, then I must be terrible. Iida's eyes widened in shock, and it didn't take long before his arms was waving in frantic gestures. What are you, Midoriya-kun? You're a perfectly respectable human being. What are you even saying? Izuku shrugged, but his insides tingled with an indecipherable emotion. If that's what you think, then you have nothing to worry about. And with that, Izuku stood up sharply, before stalking back to his own bed with a calculated coolness. His skin felt prickly and it itched uncomfortably, but he ignored it. Any further queries thrown his way went unanswered as he settled back onto the mint green sheets of his bed. If he was lucky, he might be able to get some sleep before he had to return home. 455 Chapter 18, Friends. If there was one thing Izuku didn't expect out of this whole hero killer business, it was this. Dude, why did you never tell me you were such a badass? Izuku blinked in surprise, staring dumbly at Kaminari. Excuse me. The word left his mouth automatically, being the first thought that entered his brain after the bizarre exclamation. As soon as he had stepped through the classroom doors, it had felt as if every head turned in his direction simultaneously. Next he knew, his classmates were crowding around him, all with equally excited expressions on their faces. Ashido squeezed herself to the front of the throng of students, yelling gleefully. The hero killer. Izuku took an immediate stumbling step backwards. What? Instantly, he searched for the familiar faces of Iida and Todoroki. He couldn't imagine either of them would slip up about what occurred in that dark alley, but why else was he being hounded like this? Todoroki sat quietly in his seat, eyes focused on the tabletop. Iida was making his way toward the group circled around Izuku, all the while waving his arms excessively and yelling about proper classroom conduct, and to give Midoriya-kun his personal space. Thankfully, the words didn't go completely ignored, as the students took some short steps back, but it did nothing to kill their animated chatter. Izuku met his bespectacled friend with a questioning gaze, but Iida seemed just as bewildered as he was. The freckled teen turned back to his classmates. He tilted his head slightly, switched his emotions off, and spoke flatly. I have no idea what you are talking about. Kaminari laughed and stepped up next to him, slapping him on the back. Don't be like that, dude. We've all seen the video. Izuku's face grew cold as all blood left it at once. The video? He sputtered, alarm bells ringing in his ears. Iida went still as his attention shifted solely to Kaminari, mouth still gaping open in silent reprimands. Yeah, the electric user took a step back, taking in Izuku with eyes filled with reverence. Stain was like, super intimidating. Scared the crap out of me. But you didn't even care. You just went, hey, and then scolded all those heroes right after like it was nothing. Like, damn, I wish I had those kind of guts. Totally fearless. Izuku blinked. Oh, another blink. Silence. His tensed muscles relaxed by a tiny fraction, but his confusion remained. From the sound of it, the video Kaminari was talking about wasn't his fight with Stain. Which, now that he thinks about it, he probably should have realized. Otherwise, Todoroki and Iida would be receiving the same treatment as he was right now. His classmates didn't seem satisfied with his reticence however, because suddenly, Ashido was in his face, sharing something on her phone. Look, it's all over the internet. Someone even made a forum for you. What? He promptly snatched the phone from his pink-skinned acquaintance, scanning the screen in disbelief. The banner of the website read, Deku Fan Club, in bold lettering, with the tagline, The Fearless Hero of UA, just underneath. Izuku felt lightheaded as he scrolled through the site, his disbelief increasing with every second spent staring at the words and pictures filling the bright screen. He didn't know what to feel about this. He really didn't. Was he supposed to be happy? Maybe. Was he? He honestly had no idea. The only emotion he could currently decipher was unadulterated confusion. This, he spoke, voice faltering. This is for me. Yeah. Ashido bounced excitedly. Awesome, right, you're already getting famous. Izuku handed the phone back in silence. He hesitated. I think I need to sit down for a moment. He ignored the puzzled and dissatisfied cries of his classmates to collapse into his seat, staring ahead of him blankly. He couldn't think. His mind had slowed to a halt, sluggish thoughts moving like through molasses and getting lost on the way to their destination. So many swirling emotions traveled through the length of his body, making him shake with the intensely as he tried to squash them down. He didn't know what would happen if they broke free, and he was afraid to find out. His breath struggled to enter his lungs, caught halfway through his dry throat by the lump that had formed inside. Desperate, he pinched the skin of his wrist to calm down. Breathe, breathe. He refused to have a panic attack in the middle of the classroom. If he did, he might just force a reset out of mortification. Two hands slammed into his desk, and Izuku leapt for the ceiling. He swore his heart just stopped, and when his eyes landed on the person in front of him, he almost wished it had. What the fuck is wrong with you, Kachan? Of course. It's not like he could have one good day, for once. Izuku forcefully sucked in a breath of air, almost wheezing in the process, and it took all his courage to confront the scowling face of his childhood bully. Kachan's features were screwed up in an expression of barely contained rage, and Izuku stared. All his facial muscles relaxed at once as he buried his emotions beneath layer upon layer of thick blankets, and all he was left with was a flat look that betrayed nothing. "Nothing is wrong, Kachan," he spoke, calmly. The blonde looked at him. An eyebrow twitched, and he banged his palms on the tabletop again. "Don't fucking lie to me, Deku!" he screamed, spit flecking across freckled cheeks. The tiniest of grimaces pulled at Izuku's mouth, and with the sleeve of his uniform, he wiped the saliva off. "Deku fan club, what the fuck is this shit? And you don't even have anything to say about it." "I didn't create the website, Kachan," Izuku informed. His voice was even, and he placed his hands on his desk flatly, one over the other. He really didn't want to deal with Kachan's explosive outbursts right now. He'd just answer the blonde's questions as impartially as possible, and hope that he'd go away. "I'm just as confused as you are." His angry classmate was about to yell something else, when Uraraka and Iida marched up to them. They each took up a side beside their curly-haired friend, Uraraka on his left, while Iida flanked his right. They wore matching serious expressions, and Kachan's mouth snapped shut when he saw them approach. He met them with a nasty glare, hot enough to burn. "And what the fuck do you want?" he demanded, the tips of his fingers scraping across the tabletop, curling in simmering ire. Uraraka took a dogged step forward, undaunted. "I want you to leave Deku-kun alone." "Ha!" Kachan laughed. "You think some chubby-cheeked extra like you is going to intimidate me? This chubby-cheeked extra almost defeated you during the sports festival," she pointed out, unfazed. "And it's not just me." "She's right," Iida stated. He rested a hand on Izuku's shoulder, and straightened his back to tower over the ash-blonde teen. "Now, I suggest you take a seat, before Aizawa-sensei arrive. I doubt he'd appreciate students picking fights in his classroom." The sound of Kachan grinding his teeth together was audible all the way from where Izuku sat, grating on the ears. The blonde's arms shook dangerously, and the green-eyed boy wondered if he would have to get involved. Then, Kachan tisked, and leaned away from the desk with an acrid expression on his face. His glowering stare looked as though it could melt steel, and Izuku folded into himself unwillingly. "This isn't over, Deku," he said, a deadly promise for pain to come. Small beads of sweat formed on the back of Izuku's neck, and he bit the inside of his cheek, reminding himself to not be afraid. "You're not in middle school anymore." "Actually, I think it is," Uraraka replied, a finality to her tone. "Don't ever talk to my friend again." Kachan actually looked surprised at that, and Izuku felt his own eyelids shoot into the back of his skull in astonishment. The classroom had grown silent, the only noise being that of a low growl in the back of a furious blonde's throat. "And what the fuck are you looking at, huh?" he challenged, giving his silent audience a dirty look. After no one dared to make a sound, he plunged himself back into his seat without another word, slamming his chair against the floor as hard as possible. Izuku opened his mouth, gaping. What just happened? Did Kachan really just give up? He angled his head to get a good look at both of his friends. They were still glaring at the back of his bully's head, looking as if they just smelled something rotten. Then, Iida met his eyes, and the unpleasant scowl on his face melted into a soft smile. "If Bakugo-kun ever decides to bother you again, just know that we'll always stand beside you. So don't be afraid to ask us for anything, okay?" He spoke with such earnestness, Izuku could hardly contain the tears that threatened to spill over. But he didn't want to give Kachan another reason to make fun of him, so with all the willpower in the world, he forced them down. Uraraka and Iida gave him one last smile, before they returned to their desks. Izuku felt like he was floating. He imagined himself as a green balloon, soaring through the sky and resting on fluffy white clouds. It was quite a bizarre comparison, but fitting somehow. He wasn't sure if it was happiness he was feeling right now, or maybe relief. They were such foreign concepts now, to be reminded like this was almost frightening. But whatever it wasn't bad. It was a nice respite from the usual black mass of doom tangled in his guts, always keeping him on his toes and worrying about the next reset. The next death. Maybe he was proud, not of him, but of his friends. They looked so determined, so indomitable. He knew, more than anyone, how frightening Kacchan could be when angry, and when was he not. But neither Iida, nor Uraraka, was affected by the blonde's attempts at intimidation. And that's when Izuku realized that they would both become great heroes one day. Of course, he'd always been convinced they would. But never had he been as certain as he was now, so sure. He thought a smile might be tugging at his face. He brought up a hand and carefully ran his fingers over the corners of his mouth just to make sure, and true enough, they were subtly arching upwards. He was glad Kacchan wasn't looking at him, for if he did, he was sure nothing would stop him from putting Izuku in his place. Not even Aizawa, and in that moment, Izuku forgot all about his quirk. If only for a second. 455 Chapter 19, please. It's alright. You're fine. It's okay. You're fine. You're fine. Izuku's breathing grew ever more desperate for each second that passed. His nerves had grown numb to all sensation, and not even the pain of digging his fingers into his own scalp was distinguishable in this white noise of nothingness. He couldn't remember how he ended up here. Why he's currently sobbing into his knees, back pressed hard against the wall behind him. Why this cloud of panic was consuming him raw, like prey and its predator. He tried to think, searching his memories for what led him to this point. He tried to remember. Maybe it first began when those strangers recognized him on the train. Hey, you're that kid. Deku, right? Or perhaps it was one of the many conversations he overheard passing by fellow UA students, on the way to his classroom. Isn't that crazy guy? You know, from the video. He's just a first year, but he's already more famous than us third years. I'm jealous. Why is everyone praising him? He had no right to talk to the heroes like that. We should totally invite him out sometime. I bet we could get into some crazy shit. Marketing him to the public should be exceedingly easy. He's already gotten a jump start after that video went viral. He could make a lot of money out of this. You know, I probably should say this, but don't you think Stain was kind of cool too? Izuku pulled at his hair, scratched his face, banged his head against the wall, dug his nails into his neck, bit his hand to muffle his pathetic whimpers. And he thought, I'm dying. Izuku was dying. He was sure of it. This was it. He would soon forget to breathe, and he would choke on his own despair. And drown in his tears. The hallway would run red with his blood as ruined nails tore open every last pore on his body, and it would be so terrible, so horrific, that even his quirk wouldn't be able to fix it. This was it. This was the end. There'd be no more resets. Izuku had reached his final destination, and there'd be nothing left after this. No more friends, no more heroes, no more UA, no more deaths. And Izuku thought, I'm glad. Deku-kun. Abruptly, reality crashed back into Izuku all at once. His eyes flashed open, and when did he close them? And there she was. Uraraka. He suddenly remembered everything. Everything that happened since he discovered his original quirk, and it flitted across his retinas in a blaze of motion and agony. Like fast-forwarding through a horror movie at full speed. The sensory overload of sound and moving images alone was enough to make him flinch, his skull bursting open in a splitting headache. The shock and pain enough to break him out of his hurricane of panic, but seeing Uraraka there just sent him into another spiral of hysteria, because she saw. He wanted to speak. He tried so hard to get a word past his taut lips. He needed to speak, but he couldn't. The only thing he could do was to shake and tremble and cry, and how ugly he must look like this. How pitiful. Uraraka must be so embarrassed, knowing that her friend was this weak. That this was her friend. But, Deku-kun, she sounded so sad, so worried. Izuku wanted to know what kind of expression she was making, but his vision was too blurry to make anything out, other than the beige and brown blob of color floating in front of him. You didn't come to class. We were so worried, even Aizawa-sensei, though he tried to hide it. He told me to go look for you. She crouched in front of him, cupping the side of his head softly. She moved so slow, and touched him so carefully. Like she was afraid he might break otherwise, like fine glass. And Izuku thought, she might be right. I'm sorry, she apologized, but Izuku couldn't understand why. He wanted to ask, but his body refused to follow his instructions. He hated it, hated it. Then, he felt a circle of warmth around him, as if someone was hugging him. And it felt so safe, so soft. It was scary. He was scared, frightened. I don't know what to do, Uraraka murmured into his ear. I'm so sorry. We should have done something earlier. And I'm sorry I don't know how to help you. But please, try to breathe with me, all right? Izuku could feel Uraraka's chest moving against him. It expanded and compressed at a steady pace, so calm and peaceful. Subconsciously, he copied her motions, moving in time with the serene breaths of his friend. Slowly, she started to rock his body back and forth in calming motions, and the violent rattles of his body was gradually lulled into a light shiver. His sobs transformed into soft gasps, barely audible, and his eyes slowly dried as the constant flow of tears ebbed away. But Uraraka didn't let go of him. Her grip relaxed, but she still held him close, wiping tears away with the sleeve of her uniform. She smiled at him, but it didn't hide the sadness held within her eyes. How are you feeling? She asked, and it took a while before Izuku could answer. He swallowed, hating how dry and raspy his throat felt as he spoke. I'm fine, thank you. Uraraka's mouth turned into a soft frown. Deku-kun, please tell me. How are you really feeling? Izuku blinked at her. I'm not sure what you. Please, she pleaded. Her chocolate brown eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Izuku felt like the worst person in existence. I know you're not fine. Iida knows it too, and All Might, we all know it. I know, it's not what you want to hear, but we can't help it. I know you don't want us to worry, but we care about you, you know. We can't not worry. She pulled him in for another hug, and whispered. We all just want you to be happy. A new wave of tears washed over Izuku, and he wept his woes into Uraraka's shoulder. Why? He sniffled. I don't get it. The usually bubbly girl ran gentle fingers through his curled strands, soothing the lingering ache of his tender roots. It's because you're kind, selfless, brave and understanding, and I know you'd do anything to protect those you care about. She pulled away from him, just a bit. She locked eyes with his, before proclaiming, how could we not love someone like that? Izuku's eyes widened. That's not, he muttered, quietly. That's not me. You're the only one who thinks that, Deku-kun, Uraraka promised, with eyes so gentle, it made Izuku's heart ache. But I know that's not true. We all know it, and you know I would never lie to you, right? Izuku averted his gaze. Of course not, you'd never, but still, you're. Deku-kun, she cut him off, and Izuku flinched. There was that stubbornness in her tone that was just so Uraraka. No matter what he said now, he knew he could never change her mind. I won't ever let anyone hurt you. Not even if that person is yourself. She was silent for a moment, before adding with just the tiniest hint of hesitation in her voice, I think it would be good if you had someone to talk to. Talk. For some reason, Izuku didn't think she meant with her. You mean a therapist, right? He spoke, sounding much more bitter than he intended. He didn't know why the thought seemed so unattractive to him, but he knew he didn't like where this conversation was going. Maybe it was because if he did agree with her, and if he did go, it would be like broadcasting to the entire world that, hey, this kid has some serious problems. And look, he can't even solve them on his own. Uraraka bit her lip. Yes, she said, looking unsure for a second, before it morphed into steely determination. I can tell by your expression that you're already against it. But please, I can't just stand by here and do nothing while you continue to get worse and worse. What kind of friend would I be then? What kind of hero? We won't be able to stop worrying about you unless we know you have someone that can help you. Someone who knows what you need. So please, at least give it a chance, won't you? If you're worrying about expenses or anything, I'm sure the school would be willing to provide. And if not them, I'm positive All Might would do anything in his power to make sure his favorite pupil is all right. Izuku's face grew red, and he sputtered. Favorite pupil? That's completely true, and I can't say I blame him. And if you agree, don't beat yourself up because you feel like a leech by having someone else pay for you. We're doing this because we want to help you, not because it's some sort of obligation. Izuku fell silent at that. He really didn't want to talk about his problems with some stranger, but if it would make his friends feel better, if they could finally stop worrying. Then, all right, he nodded, praying that he wouldn't come to regret this decision down the lane. I'll do it. 455 Chapter 20, The Truth. Anne. A short on this time. I'm probably gonna update you'd be surprised before I post the next chapter of this. To say Izuku was nervous about the first appointment with his therapist would be an understatement. He had to rise from his chair to take short walks across the waiting room numerous times, just because he couldn't stop squirming. Eventually, his name was called. Inhaling deeply, he followed a tall woman waiting for him down a corridor and into a secluded room. It was fairly sparse, with minimalist design and soft colors. His therapist sat down in a mossy green chair next to a small table, and Izuku followed suit by taking the seat across from her. She introduced herself as Kyusai Honshitsu. This was the woman who was supposed to help him, but Izuku wondered how. She seemed nice enough, with a welcoming aura of sympathy. But there's no way she could care about all her patients like he was supposed to believe, especially someone she'd just met. Right, well, he wasn't here for himself in the first place, so he supposed it didn't matter. If this was what it took for people to finally stop asking him about his well-being, he'd go to every meeting. Kyusai started their session by asking a bunch of questions, trying to determine what Izuku needed help with. He answered them all, some more hesitatingly than others. And for every answer she received, she would jot something down in a little notebook of hers. He wondered what it would say by the end of this. Beyond hope. By some point, Izuku must have zoned out, because Kyusai was now calling for his attention. Midoriya-san. Izuku's pupils contracted as he regained his focus. Why yes. He stuttered, wondering for just how long drive. Kyusai had been calling his name. I was wondering if there was anything on your mind that you would like to discuss. She tapped her pen on the scribbled pages of her pad. Her eyes shone with acceptance and quiet reassurances, but Izuku still couldn't shake off his doubts. It would have made him feel guilty, because she really did look like she wanted to help him, but he was getting sick of living life in an unending state of self-blame. No, there's nothing, he settled for, after a moment's contemplation. But Kyusai didn't look convinced. I can't force you to talk about something that makes you uncomfortable, she began. But I would like to remind you of our doctor-patient confidentiality. Anything you say to me won't ever leave this room, unless I have your explicit permission. The only exception would be if I believe you are a threat to yourself or others, in which case I can only tell the person you're threatening, or someone that can ensure your safety. A threat to himself? Does it count if he's going to come back to life, anyways? But you wouldn't believe me, even if I told you, he muttered, smiling bitterly to himself. My job is to listen, not tell you you're wrong, she returned, resting the notepad in her lap. It is clear that this is something which affects you deeply. And whether I believe you or not, sharing whatever is on your mind could still help ease your burden. I'm not here to judge you, Midoriya-san. I'm here to help. There were those eyes again. Izuku exhaled deeply. He knew she wouldn't believe him. She wouldn't. But, even so, anything you say to me won't ever leave this room. Maybe, it doesn't matter what she believes. Maybe, all he needs is to let it out. Well, there is one thing. He put his elbows on the table and leaned forward, locking her eyes with his. His face eased into a neutral expression that foretold of nothing, and Dr. Kusai's eyebrows rose just a fraction, appearing intrigued. Then, I can't die. Sue, that's it, thanks for watching.